afternoon from the UK, or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. We've got a number of attendees now joining the session. We've just started now, so more are going to drop in from the numbers that are there. What we're going to do today is the Medic Meets session for St. George's University in Grenada. Now, it's a slightly different format than our usual Medic Meets. Usually we just have an informal conversation with one or two people. We've actually got a host of people today to provide a really, comprehensive session really about the university. It's going to be slightly different. We're first going to have a 20-minute presentation. I think Professor Clunes from the university, who's been living in Grenada, I think for over 12 years now, Professor, yeah? Years, yeah. So we've got that presentation, about 20 minutes. Then we've actually got a panel of students and graduates. We've got Kenneth from Hong Kong. Just say hello, Kenneth. Oh, Kenneth is there.
Hey guys.
Hi there. Kenneth is from Hong Kong, second year student on the four-year pathway. Then we've got Jessica, who's a final year student, not far from graduation. Jessica's from Zimbabwe and has just been doing some clinical placements in the NHS in the UK. And Ninad, who's
hey everyone,
a graduate from St. George's and doing his residency in New York, I think second year residency now. So when we come around after 20 minutes, we can have a chat about the different stages of education and qualification that our three guests are from, and talk about some of the pathways they've had to go through in terms of getting to where they are now and perhaps where they want to go in the future. So without any further ado, just a couple of housekeeping things. There's a Q&A feature on the webinar. What I'm going to ask all the attendees to do, whether you're in a school or individually, is just, if you've got a question, write it into the Q&A feature. I will then read the question out at the appropriate time, because anyone who's watching this recording perhaps after today's webinar will then actually be able to actually hear your question, which if you've got, I guarantee a number of other people will have as well. So without any further ado, I think Professor Clunes, who's a Brit living in the Caribbean for the last 12 years, so I'm immensely jealous of him now, has got a presentation for us, which will take around about 20 minutes. Okay, Professor Clunes, is that okay? If you can take over.
Sure, that's fantastic. Yeah, no problems at all. Everyone can hear me well and see the screen? Yep, okay. Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you this morning. In the introduction there, my name is Mark Clunes. I've lived in the Caribbean for 12 years. I'm the Associate Dean of Basic Sciences here in Grenada for the 4-year MD program. And I thought I would take this 20 minutes just to walk you through our curriculum, especially the first part, the portion that you spend down here in Grenada, what we call the Basic Sciences, although increasingly that's a little outdated because we did plenty clinical work in those first 2 years as well. But traditionally, the Flexner was always a sort of 2-year basic sciences and 2-year clerkship. And although we're still largely like that, really we try to get as much clinical components into the first 2 years as possible. So first of all, we're located in Grenada. We're the last island before you get to Trinidad, which is on the mainland. It's a tri-island state, and we've got some unique opportunities. You know, one of the things that's wonderful about Grenada is it's a very different culture. It's a very different healthcare system, and our students, as well as the curriculum, get the opportunity to actually go out and do some community work. We do things like health fairs, where the students will go out into the community and educate about things like diabetes and the conditions that are sort of endemic in the Grenadian population. So our students get a lot of opportunities to see a very different healthcare system and actually go out into the community and practice that even within the first 2 years of basic sciences. Our mission statement is really, to provide a diverse, multicultural and international environment. That we certainly do. We've got students and faculty from all over the world. I'm originally from the UK. I spent some time in the US and now down here in Grenada. But most of my colleagues are from far and wide across the world. And in fact, although many of our students are from the United States, I actually struggle when I think how many faculty we've got from the United States. We've got a number of them, but they sure are not predominant. We've got a very diverse faculty body. Just to let you know, everything in our curriculum is driven towards the outcome objectives of a 4-year program. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I just want to highlight to you that the 3 sort of pillars that the curriculum address are medical knowledge, clinical skills, and professional behaviours. And those are the three domains that we think that the curriculum have to address. And each of these domains has some fairly specific outcomes that we expect. And so everything in the curriculum is geared towards these outcome objectives. So medical knowledge, obviously, is the important part that we first concentrate on in those first 2 years. We've recently undergone a curricular change. We used to run a very traditional disciplines-based curriculum. I'm a physiologist, so we would teach physiology in the second term. What we've done now is we've moved to an organ systems-based curriculum. But one of the difficulties I always had with an organ system-based curriculum, it's very difficult to talk about something like renal pathology when you've only done rudimentary cardiovascular. Because you have to learn each of these things in sequence, you don't get a holistic picture. So what you'll see is when I get onto the description of our curriculum, we've got what we call a spiral. We go through all of the systems in the first year, and we try to get at least all the basic elements down. In the second year, we go back through all the systems, but the focus changes. Rather than normal function, we go into abnormal function, as well as treatment and management. So really you go through the systems 2 times. And then the last 12 weeks of our curriculum, we go through a 3rd time. And that's really, there's no new information in that last 12 weeks, but it's a reintegration of everything that's happened in that first 2 cycles. And that really allows you to start to integrate everything in a sort of very strongly case-based last 12 weeks. So as I say, I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, but it's just to give you an idea that the 3 pillars that we think of are clinical knowledge. Obviously, you have to know what is going on in a patient. You have to know what is normal. You have to know what is abnormal. And that goes from the physiology, the anatomy, the pharmacology. Each of these different elements are brought in as we go through the systems. In terms of clinical skills, we think it's incredibly important, because although you spend the last 2 years in the clinical clerkships and you're going to be seeing patients every day, and we've got some fantastic speakers here who will talk about that just in a little while, we'd like to start that process early, because although we typically do it in a standardized patient setting, meaning you're seeing a simulated patient, which is what most of us do in the early stages to make a more standard approach. But the communication skills are exactly the same, how you communicate with the patient. One of the things they always say is that history and examination are so important to make a diagnosis. And one of the things I always emphasize to our students is that history and examination require you to form a rapport with your patient, to allow them to open up, to give you the information you require. Because if they don't give you the information that you require, you can't make a diagnosis. So communication is such an important part of physician training. So we spend a lot of time going through clinical skills, and I don't mean the manual skills. That's the easy part, where to place a stethoscope, how to actually take a blood pressure. Clinical skills like that are the easy part. I think the harder part is getting the rapport and the communication going with the patient, the transparency, and the sort of standard approach to a history. And then the other thing that, of course, is incredibly important to us is professional behavior. And again, we always say that as soon as you step in the door, as soon as you put that white coat on day 1, your medical training has started. You are now part of the community, and those professional behaviors are expected of you. So again, that professional behavior relates to how you deal with patients, obviously, but also how you deal with your colleagues, your peers, and also the people that work on your team, because modern healthcare is very much team-based delivery rather than individual-based delivery. And so it's incredibly important that you have good dynamic and professional dynamic within any team that you work in. So this is a 3rd pillar of what we do in the curriculum. Now, the other thing that we're very proud of at St. George's University is that we've got a lot of student support. So we have dedicated departments that are there to help guide you through any eventuality within our curriculum. We've got the Academic Advising, Development and Support Group. Now, again, we've got this down to a fine art. Rather than it being a referenced system, certainly they're available for anyone to consult at any time. but we also are active, and we reach out to students now. So after every examination, they'll check in with you to make sure that things are developing and growing the way you want them to grow. And we have a dedicated team just for that. And they're really specialists in the curriculum and the pathway through the curriculum. Now, we've also got other big departments that will help. Department of Education Services. So if you've got any learning strategies, advising that you need, time management, and they're there to help, again, one-on-one. They'll make an appointment with you and they'll go through your strategies, they'll go through your time management, they'll help you to develop some improved learning skills. And then we've got the Dean of Students Office, and the Dean of Students Office is really for all pastoral care. So, you know, life has a habit of throwing a curveball at us from time to time. And if that happens during your academic life, you go and you chat to the Dean of Students and they'll help you arrange things like a leave of absence, or talk about how flexible our curriculum is and how far we can manage a situation within the confines of whatever problem may arise. So we really do have a multi-department, multi-faceted team of people that are there to help and support. And again, you know, just to say that there's also diversity in all of those teams. There's faculty that represent each of those departments are from all across the world. And we have students from all across the world. So the environment in St. George's University is very dynamic, very international, and there's a lot of cooperation. I mean, one of the nice things about St. George's University, and I've always seen that in our students in the 12 years I've been here, is the collaborative nature. I run a thing called the Honours Program, and that's where we take the really well academic performance students, and they give their time to come and mentor and help the students in the first year. And there's a very strong element within our students of help and community. And we even have colleges to develop those communities as well. So knowing that community is so important for learning, we place each student in a community, in a college, and try to provide a little bit of cohesion for each college. So when you go to a small group or whether you go to lecture, you'll be in your small college. So although we've got a fairly large intake of total students, you will mix with a much smaller cohort, and you'll start to see familiar faces each time you're in a lecture, each time you're in a small group, even as we're online now with a new delivery of the curriculum that we have. And everything's still live, by the way. We still do everything live. And we have to do it, of course, 12 hours apart, because we have to cater for everyone in the world. So because we have time zones from all across the world, we actually have to do everything double time. So the lectures are twice a day, almost 12 hours apart, so that we can cater for almost any time zone in the world. Small groups are a similar pattern. So some details on the curriculum. When you join in first term, the first term will be the basic principles of medicine. That's the first bar up here. Let me just see if I can put my laser pointer on, make it a little clearer. The basic principles of medicine. It's a 17 credit course. It blends anatomy, biochemistry, histology, and physiology. And of course, the first thing you're going to do when you come in is spend 6 weeks going through the foundations to medicine before we truly get into the systems curriculum. This stuff you'll probably be familiar with. It's the sort of basic biochemistry, it's the basic physiology, and recaps on all of those basic elements before we truly get into a systems curriculum. So much of what we do here is a review of what might be considered a sort of undergraduate level biochemistry and physiology. And of course, the anatomy is often new to a lot of people. People have often not done anatomy at an undergraduate level, or certainly not to the same level we do it at in medicine. So then that's 6 weeks. Then we start into the systems curriculum. We start with the musculoskeletal system, and then we go into cardiovascular, pulmonary, and renal systems. And each of these elements will be sort of continuous assessment. So there's 5 exams through that first term, 2 exams in foundations to medicine, 1 exam in musculoskeletal, and 2 examinations here. So there's a continuous assessment. And we think that's important because that allows students to gauge exactly how their strategies are working, develop alternative plans if alternative plans are needed, or confirm and give them confidence to move forward if things are working well. But as I say, the emphasis at this point is on normal physiology, normal anatomy, normal function, but we're always using disease as an illustration of teaching points in here. If you're successful and move into the second term, we then continue with endocrinology and reproduction, digestion and metabolism, and then we've got a larger unit at the end here, module 3. There's 3 exams here, which is neurosciences and behavioral sciences. So we go right from central nervous system as a sort of hard science, as it were, and then out into the social sciences of what are the implications for behaviors and development, and we bring all of that in. And that concludes the first year. So really, it's not a case of the old style anatomy or physiology, but 1 week where we're doing a couple of weeks where we're doing cardiovascular, you'll maybe get an anatomy lecture on valves at your first lecture of the day, and then I'll come along and talk about the function of those valves and pressure volume loops and the implications there. So we try to, each discipline becomes relative to each other. And I think that helps because, you know, to learn anatomy in isolation, I always found it quite tough. I'm a guy who's into function. I need to know why it's like that and the consequences. So for me, to have the anatomy mixed to the physiology is incredibly helpful because it really allows, I think, a deeper understanding of the issues. We've then got a short term 3, which is it's a bit of a hiatus from the systems because it really goes into public health and community health. So it's a short 6-week module that really takes a public health view. It's got a bit of medical jurisprudence, bioethics in there. And this is also from a public health point of view. We start things like microbiology and immunology because they've got such important public health connections.
Pretty relevant at the moment, isn't it, Professor Clunes? Because the one module that doesn't seem as the popular one, but it's definitely the one that's got everyone's
the topic
at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, we've developed some online topics specifically on COVID, of course, over this last year. We've delivered that out into the last 2 years of our curriculum. So we've been fast to adapt to the situation. The second year, we go back through the systems again, but you'll see here that the focus changes slightly. Now that we know that you're comfortable with the anatomy, the physiology, the biochemistry, the neuroscience, we go back through the systems, but this time the emphasis is going to be on the microbiology, the pathology, the pharmacology. And although clinical skills is mentioned here as a department, because we have a lot of clinical skills in the second year, clinical skills is also present in that first year. I want to emphasize that it's not split into 1 year without and 1 year with. We actually do have clinical skills right through the first year as well. So again, we go back through each of the systems, foundations, cardiovascular, renal, respiratory, digestive, but again, the emphasis on the pathology, the pathophysiology, and the microbiology and treatment, the therapy, the pharmacology. And then the last semester of that 2-year block is into musculoskeletal. And this really finishes the second cycle through the systems. Module 2, 3, and 4 are the third cycle through the systems. And this is now case-based almost exclusively, where we just go through case after case and we try to integrate everything over those first sections. So this is incredibly useful for review and for those of our students who are going on to do the licensure exam immediately after this component here in the US system. This is an incredibly important 12 weeks where you're really testing your integrated information, and it's a very comprehensive set of examinations over the course of that last 12-week block. Now, I've got a slide for each term, but I don't want to sort of go through and get into too much detail. But what this little infographic does is it kind of shows you what your term 1 would look like. So this is the timeline left to right, and each dot represents activity of a certain type and modality. So obviously we have lectures every day. Every day we have 2 lectures. And now, as I say, that skips between different disciplines. It's anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, a bit of histology, and the basic principles of medicine. Those would be the sort of main disciplines that are present. But you can see here that they're present through all modules. We also have what are called directed learning activities. These are sort of asynchronous elements or semi-asynchronous elements. These are maybe short video clips or specific readings that supplement what is part of our main curriculum. Now, they're not completely asynchronous, and some of them we will indicate to you, hey, watch this video before you come to this lecture, or go to that lecture and then watch the video. So there is indication given, and our course management site gives you a weekly schedule of activities along with the order in which all of those activities have got to be completed. We've also got something you'll see here, which I should explain, IMCQs. We have these multiple times a week. What this is to get you used to application, rather than just sit and digest information in a lecture. And I should say, actually, we use clickers in each lecture. So it's a dynamic environment, every so often we'll fire up a clicker question, the audience responds to that, and that allows us to either expand on elements or explain different elements as we go along. And that's part of every lecture anyhow. However, these IMCQs are specifically designed to only be question sessions. So it's 1 hour, and we maybe go through 15 different what we call clinical vignettes. So little clinical scenarios with a question at the end. And it's application of knowledge that's really important here. So you're going to get that multiple times a week is an application of that knowledge. And again, all by clickers. So you use the audience response system to register your answer. And then the faculty will give you a debrief as to why A is correct and B, C, D, and E are incorrect. So there's an immediate debrief happens after those. And these are very popular with students. I think we introduced those about 4 or 5 years ago now when we took over the Dean's office, and these have been incredibly helpful in the curriculum. Small groups, so you'll sit with anywhere between 8 and 12 other students, and you'll discuss specific cases, and that will happen every week. There'll be 1 or 2 cases that you discuss, and in later terms, sometimes even more frequently. We also, as I say, have clinical skills. So in the first term, you can see here patient encounters. Now, why there's a bar here is because whatever content you're learning in that small group case, you're also going to see a patient that day, and you're going to interview the patient and do some basic clinical skills. Now, the first term, it will be things like blood pressure, pulse, measuring respiration rates. But as we get further on into the curriculum, there'll be far more involvement with the patients. You can see here by the time we get to musculoskeletal, cardiopulmonary, renal, you'll be seeing a number of these small groups tied in with an encounter with a patient and some communication skills built in there as well. SimLab, again, it's like walking into a hospital. Now we've had to adapt and we do those online now as well. We've got one, and I can't see it because your faces are on there, but there's another one in the second part of cardiopulmonary, renal. And so each of the terms has a SimLab case that you'll attend as well. No hospital visits in term 1. You will actually go out into the local Grenadian hospital and do hospital visits. That will be really concentrated in the latter part of the curriculum. So most of what you see in the first part of the curriculum are what we call standardized patients. These are patients that have been trained to simulate a certain condition and even give standardized responses. It's like an actor, essentially. And you'll be interviewing those. And that's a very typical thing in medical schools now, because once you go to the hospital, of course, the patients are who they are. We can't standardize who the patients are and the conditions you're going to see in those hospital visits. So we need some way of making sure that we cover all the bases during the curriculum, and we do that with standardized patients. It's very, very common. Laboratory sessions, these are things like what we call wet labs. So these are cadaver labs. Again, these are running online at the moment, and they take off. You can see here musculoskeletal, cardiopulmonary, and then in second term. But really there's not so much wet labs in the second year. You've done all of that to get the anatomy in the first year. We also do HPWP sessions. These are health promotion and wellness. So what's certainly been an incredibly important part of postgraduate training, or at least what's been a significant worry in postgraduate training, is physician burnout and wellness of the physician. And so there's been lots of talk about that at things like the AAMC and how to improve conditions and make sure that, and now maybe our students today can talk a little bit about that as well. But we kind of start these sessions. So this would be things like stress management. So we get psych services to come in and maybe do a seminar on stress management. Now, again, we've been sensitive to that because often the student will say, hey, well, I'm not stressed, so this is not relevant to me. But what we try to do is say, well, only half of the session is reflective on you. The other half is, what about your patient? Many of your patients are going to be very stressed. So think about not yourself, but also how you're going to help a patient that's stressed. So we've got a number of different ones. We also use one of these as the Dean's office to come in and communicate to you about all developments in the curriculum, the feedback we've got, the responses that we're enacting as a consequence of feedback. And so we try to maintain communication through those sessions as well. So I think communication is key to us, and we've got a very good association with the Student Government Association. Ultrasound, we've incorporated that into our curriculum, so point of care ultrasound, and we've got, I think, one session in term one, two sessions in term one and a couple of term two. And again, they've been very popular because they're very hands-on. You'll see a patient, you'll actually perform ultrasound and do a bit of diagnosis. And then, of course, we've got things like formative quizzes. Now, although these are punctuated here, there's one sort of formally launched quiz every week that's worth some credit. But we've also got a whole bunch of practice quizzes that are continuously available. Just you can dip into those and use them. And so that really describes term one. I'm not going to go on and do 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got everything mapped out here, but it's really just a variation. And just to show you, in term 5, you'll see that all the hospital visits here start. But those are the essential elements and modalities of the curriculum and the community that we try to build here. So that's pretty much it. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Okay, Professor Clunes, thank you for that. It's really good to actually get some more knowledge about how the curriculum is, rather than standard things about how to apply, etc. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover a few things first, just very briefly, before I then hand over to Ninand to actually ask some questions directly. Obviously, all the delegates here, the 3 students here, all went on the 4-year program. And I think for those people that perhaps missed the start, St. George's doesn't just have a 4-year program. While the 4-year program is the pathway to medicine, there are different hop-on points prior to that, depending on the education that you as a student has had. So we've got applicants at the moment who are applying for their 5-year program. So they'd be students who've come straight from high school with A-levels or the International Baccalaureate, what we call an NQF Level 3 qualification. But there's also a 6-year route, depending on the education system in your country, or even a 7-year route, depending again on how the education system in your country gets you ready to enter university. So St. George's has those different pathways, but they are routes to get onto the 4-year program. And quite interestingly, some of those years can be sat in the UK at Northumbria University. And one of the years, if you're on, I think, the 5-year program, can actually be taken in India as well. So, so for some students, they would do the first 2 years in the UK, 1 year in Grenada, and then their 2 years clinical placements either in the USA or the UK. So there are different pathways depending on which you as a student prefer. And that's one thing that St. George's offers, is immense flexibility really for students to actually get to the qualification. But ultimately, we are there to qualify as a medical professional and take your career kind of to where you want to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it on its head a bit, and we're going to actually start talking to Ninand, who has gone through this program, has graduated, and is now in his 2nd year residency in New York. So Ninand, if you could unmute yourself just for a moment.
Of course.
If you could just give us a little summary, because I know you're originally from India and
Yep.
you're now working as a doctor in the US.
Yep.
What was it about St. George's that was kind of made you feel it was the right university for you? Because it's a substantial investment in money and time. So you've got to have gone through a thought process before finally coming to that. It's not something you do overnight.
So St. George's University was a very, very unique choice for me and for all of my colleagues and fellow students from the US, because it gives us an opportunity as non-traditional students to get into medicine. So American medical schools, I'm sure that everyone here knows, are very, very competitive and have limited amounts of seats and don't always do justice to people with true passions in medicine, like myself or some of my classmates. And so St. George's University was just exactly that for me. It was the right reason because it gave me an opportunity being a non-traditional student. So kind of to go into that a little bit, I was initially a physics major and I wanted to do electricals versus mechanical engineering. And I wasn't always sure which path I wanted to go into. So during the third year of my bachelor's degree studies in undergrad at Stony Brook University, I did some internships. And within a week and a half, I just knew that I never wanted to do that again because although the work was fascinating and the science is incredible, the lifestyle wasn't for me. It was more of a 9 to 5 in the office and meetings in front of a computer. And I just have a burning kind of a need to interact with people and work on projects in a very kind of high acuity setting. And so I didn't decide on medicine right away, but at the same time, I used to work with teenagers and adolescents with autism. And so I knew that I had a place in healthcare, in helping people and serving people. And so Stony Brook University actually has an affiliated medical school as well as a hospital. And so I got a chance to shadow a pediatrician there, do research with a colorectal surgeon. And from then on that I knew that med school is what I wanted to do. And so fortunately, I had the kind of resources available to me through US Department of Education student loans to go back to Stony Brook and take on biochemistry as a second major. And that would also give me an opportunity to study for the MCAT exam, which is the entrance examination for US students to go into medical school, and also kind of get my feet wet into the field of medicine. So I did that quite a lot. And I applied to St. George's University because as a non-traditional student, SGU wants students like me who are committed to medicine, who understand that medicine is a long, long process, an arduous one at that. But they saw my passion, they saw my desire, and so they accepted me. A few of the other reasons that I wanted to go to SGU is because it's in Grenada, and so uh, kind of going back to my background, I grew up in India. I moved to the United States just when I was 15 years old. So kind of at during my most formative years, New York is cold, gloomy, very fast paced. And I just did not kind of feel that it was the right environment for me to prosper in. And I knew quite a lot of people from my high school in Long Island, as well as my undergraduate university, who had gone to SGU and become successful physicians. And so I wanted to go to Grenada for the experience, for the diversity, for the opportunity, and of course the weather and the beaches. And so that worked out perfectly for me. Few of the other things that I loved about SGU, and Dr. Clunes alluded to this earlier, was students going out into Grenada and hosting health fairs. So I was actually president of the club called AMSA, which is American Medical Students Association, and I was part of AMSA for all 2 years while I was in Grenada, helping with the health fairs. And that was actually one of the most formative experiences as to why I decided to go into emergency medicine, which is my specialty. And the reason for that was because I loved getting to know people and build that rapport with them within 5 minutes of meeting them and assuaging their fears. Because a lot of medicine, I believe 75% of it is not doing the surgeries and not prescribing medications, but it's actually just talking to people and explaining to them that yes, you feel miserable, but it's transient. It's temporary, and here are the facts as to why. And so through those health fairs, through my professors, through my lectures, I was able to get the knowledge I needed to be able to explain to my patients. And at that time, people that came to these health fairs just for screening examinations, um, what it is that was ailing them and how we could fix it. And so emergency medicine is just that. So I don't really have like a very kind of formal presentation that Dr. Clunes did. So I'm more than happy to go into just more and more of this.
Obviously, you're effectively a a globally mobile student. Now you're back effectively what is now your home, working as a physician. Now, for those students who are perhaps coming to medicine or looking at international medicine for the first time, one of the first things obviously you need to do to go and work in the United States is go through the USEMI steps, and that takes. I know this because I've had students that I've worked with for many years who've gone through this. It's not something you just do instantly. It's a process that you have to go through. 3 major exams: the step 1, the step 2 clinical knowledge, and the step 2 clinical skills. What kind of support did St. George's give you? Because obviously St. George's prides itself on having many of its graduates go into residency in the US. So what kind of support did you have for that? Because those exams are they are intense exams. Put it this way: 7 hours an exam for USMLE Step 1, intense exam. That needs a lot of support. What did you get?
Okay, so I mean, that's just the most important question. I'm very happy that I can address it. So for those that don't know, the way that this USMLE step exams can be generalized are that step 1 is what is the disease, step 2 is what contributes to the disease and the risk factors or the complications associated with it, and step 3 is taking that specific disease and how to manage it over time, or how to manage it in the emergent setting. And so for step 1, especially going back to a little bit of what Dr. Clunes was talking about, the curriculum, SGU's curriculum is designed for success in the USMLE step 1. And so every single thing that you learn, whether it's through the lectures, the small cases, the IMCQs, which ironically were started with my semester down in Grenada, were the most useful things that I could have ever gone through. And so just to give an example, when we were doing cardiovascular physiology, those concepts are extremely abstract and they're hard to grasp because you can't really envision what the heart is doing when you can't properly see it, especially as a medical student. So these IMCQs or these formal sessions where you're in the lecture room with your classmates or now on Zoom, and the question is on the board and you get to answer it independently. And whether you get it correct or incorrect, then just a poll is shown, but the correct answer is not given. And then you get to discuss the same question with your classmates. And so that kind of group studying and exchange of ideas really promoted to my learning. And so that skill applies to third year of medical school in clinical sciences and fourth year of medical school and in residency when you're preparing to take step 3. And that's exactly how SGU prepares you, right? They give you all the resources that you need, but the building the habit of how to properly study for these exams comes through your time at SGU. And it's not just the lectures, it's the group study efforts. A few of the other things that really helped me was because I was a physics major and a non-traditional medical student, the way that you learn physics is kind of how you learn physiology, but it does not apply to anatomy or histology or neurology or pathology or pathophysiology or pharmacology. And so that's what the Department of Educational Services, or DES, did for me. I would actually make an appointment with them before the start of each term and sit down with the learning advisors and kind of go through what worked for me and what didn't work for me. So another stark example of this is a friend of mine who's actually a surgeon in Miami currently. He's the type of person that could learn if you just give him a 700-page tome and that's it. And this guy will sit and read and get hundreds on his examinations. I'm not like that. And so what DES did for me was they taught me how I learned best. And so for me, it's lots and lots of multiple choice questions, lots and lots of repetitive behaviors. So just that one, any given one lecture, I would probably see it about 12 to 15 times before the exam. And that's how it stuck with me because I was able to make connections. And it can be a time intensive process, but it's a very individualized process. And that's what DES helped me with. DES also has something called the group study sessions, which are these hour-long sessions facilitated by upper term students so let's say I'm a term 1 student, a term 2 student who has done exceptionally well in that course or subject is given the opportunity to facilitate weekly 1-hour sessions to review that week's material as well as give tips. And so that's a fantastic opportunity to learn, and that's a good way to prepare for the USMLEs as well, is because these students who are now a term ahead of me and have all the know-how and the wisdom of what the exam will be is being passed down. Excuse me. And in the same vein, I was allowed to teach for DES as well because I did well on these exams. And I don't have to do it, but one of the greatest and one of the most important things in practicing medicine is to be able to teach a concept, not just learn it, not just apply it, but to teach it forward. And DES did that for me. So all of these kinds of things put together are prepared me best for USMLE.
Just to kind of, I don't want to take it too long because I want to move on
Sure.
to Jessica next. Sure, talk about her experience, which is similar in some ways to you, but she's doing a different clinical route. How have you found that transition into residency in New York? Because obviously, I'm surprised that you've actually got the time to come with on here today, because I imagine your hours are substantial in emergency medicine being a resident doctor. It's not like in Europe where we have a working times directive in the United States, clearly. But did you find that transition from, say, being in Grenada to then doing your clinical attachments to then going to be a MD resident doctor?
So one of the best things about SGU is that you're not just going from Grenada into residency. During those clinical rotations, you get an opportunity through SGU's vast network of hospitals to do rotations in specific specialties in specific cities. And so SGU has hospitals all over New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California, Chicago, Maryland, so on and so forth. And so I did a majority of my rotations in the city of New York and some in New Jersey because I wanted to stay here and I wanted to learn what practicing medicine here is like. So as a medical student in these hospitals, I had already seen what it would require of me if I were a resident there. And so that transition and the transition from 4th year of medical school to 1st year residency is the toughest because you go from 0 responsibility to 100% responsibility. And the learning curve is just as intense, but that transition was smooth because of my experiences through SGU, through my clinical rotations, as well as kind of the vast network of graduates who happen to be practicing emergency medicine. And I reached out to a few of them while I was applying to residency and after I was accepted and preparing to start residency as to what to expect, how to study, what to prepare. And, everyone just gave me a lot of great pointers. So while that transition was rough from a personal standpoint, it was not so much because I felt not prepared, right? If that makes sense. And the reason why I have some time today is because that's the beauty of emergency medicine. It's all shift work. I'm never on call. So I'm not expected to go to the hospital for another hour and a half. And it's just perfect timing.
We're going to let you go now because I imagine also sleep is at a premium, being an emergency medicine doctor in New York.
Of course.
Jessica, is it okay if I come to you next? Is that okay? And just to give people who listen to either this live or the recording, Jessica's actually from Zimbabwe and has just flown into Zimbabwe or recently back from a rainy, dreary UK to the summer in South Africa. So obviously your experience is a bit different because you've transitioned effectively from what I would call an American style university to the British healthcare system, which is set up in a very different way than obviously the US healthcare system is set up. So same question to you really. How have you found that transition come from a US style environment to what we call a national health service environment in the UK?
Sure. So I found it very different. There's mostly been positives, actually. I think that being at SGU has helped a lot. The curriculum, as you said, is very geared to step 1 and step 2, especially step 1. So you have a very big knowledge after those first 2 years, which helps so much being in clinical years, which the British system start their clinical years, but their curriculum spans over the 5 years. So I feel like our knowledge going into clinical years in the UK is often at a slightly higher standard, which is really nice because you're able to understand a lot more. But at the same time, there are slight challenges, like with the American units and the British units, and you've obviously got slightly different cutoff values. And you, during your clinical years, you're studying for your NBME subject exams. So that's sometimes where I've run into a bit of a problem, where you are studying for your American exams, but you're practice or learning in a British environment. So the doctors you're learning from and the values you're seeing in practice are British values. But again, SGU give you the opportunity of access to multiple online platforms, one being UWorld, which you have so many questions for that prepare you really well for your NBME exams. So you do still get exposure to the US values and cutoffs.
Because I know you're due to graduate soon, I think, aren't you? I think in the next 12 months, I think, and I think we had a slight conversation before where you are looking to take up your foundation year training in the UK. Being a non-British passport holder and qualifying from a university outside of the UK, you're going to have to take the PLAB exam, which is still in play until 2024, when it's replaced by the United Kingdom's medical licensing examinations, or medical licensing assessment, I should say. How have you been preparing for PLAB? Is this something which you're actually now getting ready to take? And how have you found that kind of preparation for the foundation year employment that you're going to go into in 12 months' time or so?
Yeah, so I've just finished all of my subject exams, and I'm due to graduate just before midway through next year. So you can only apply to take the PLAB exams once you have completed all of your medical school requirements. So that's I'll start studying for that at the beginning of next year, and hope to take my PLAB 1, which is all multiple choice, and it's a pass-fail exam. I'll plan to take that in the next sitting after I graduate. And then following that, PLAB 2 is all patient encounters. So I think it's 15 or 18 stations where it's interviews with patients rather than multiple choice. And I know there are multiple courses you can do in the UK, but I've spoken to a few UK students who have taken the PLAB just to get advice as well about taking PLAB 1, which is next on my radar. And a lot of them have said that the syllabus at SGU and the way that we do questions and have taken the subject exams really prepare you well for the PLAB 1. And a lot of them have said that they don't actually feel like there's a need, and not many of them have taken courses for PLAB 1 at least, just because the foundations, like Dr. Clunes said, we cover it, and the syllabus has changed a bit since I was even though it's only 3 years ago, but it still has changed, but they're always trying to change it for the better. And you do cover the systems multiple times, so you do get the repetitiveness, and again you cover the systems in your clinical years, so you see the same thing in more depth, and it just makes a lot more sense, and all comes together, which I think really does help. And I'm hoping, based on what the people I've spoken to have taken PLAB 1, that it's all going to hopefully stand in good stead.
Which hospitals have you been based in? So I'm trying to get an idea of the breadth of hospitals in the UK that St George's University gives you an option to do your 2 years of clinical sciences in.
Yeah, so we are directly affiliated with hospitals through SGU. I have done my rotations mostly in the south, in Winchester and in Basingstoke. So two different hospitals of the same trust, which I think is slightly different to the US. So our hospitals are more part of trusts.
Yes.
So I've stayed in the same trust, but you can move around for different rotations as long as a hospital has space for you and you want to do a rotation at their hospital. You can pretty much move quite widely around the UK. I know there's about 3 I think in London, there's some on the East Coast, there's one further down in Poole. I think there's about 9 or 11 hospitals that we're affiliated with.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. Listen, we are getting on in time, Jessica. Thanks for that. I know you've got 1 year to go and some online teaching still to do before you get back to your final clinical placements. But you know, you're going to be in the UK next year working as a doctor, no doubt. And the UK needs doctors, as you've probably experienced with your time in the NHS recently. I want to move over to Kenneth. Kenneth, I know from Hong Kong. Kenneth, you're at a different stage in your journey to this now because you're a second-year student, yeah?
Yeah.
Kong, so at a different point. I want to talk a little bit more about your student experience as well, because obviously you're coming at the moment from an academic background rather than the clinical side, which Ninand and Jessica are focused on. So what do you think are the strengths that you've experienced in the classroom, albeit some of it virtually at the moment?
Well, at the moment, everything is virtual now. To me, it's not a really huge differences because I would say the first 2 years you're in medical school, you pretty much just stay at your home to studying all the time, like more than 8 hours per day. So it doesn't really matter, to be honest, where like which part of the world you are. You still need to sit down and study. But what a good thing about SGU, I would say, like as the doctors, my other classmates said, the IMCQ session is very important to me personally because you can discuss with your colleagues and your classmates about certain topic and questions. So, because our curriculum right now is on system basis. So for me to go in, I was like, you know, I can't get the whole picture of it, so I don't really understand. Sometimes I'm just, you know, missing some pieces. But after discussing with your classmate, you know, the question like why this is happening and why did you get this wrong, you go for each of the answer choices, so you can make a lot more sense, like a better picture of it. So like be a lot more prepared. And our curriculum decided is more like a repetitive way. So like because I'm in the end of my second years, like I just finished a term for like literally 3 days ago. So I've seen the system multiple times, so I kind of like have a better understanding. Also, like easier for I would say more confidence to target the exam instead of like, you know, going in and not sure what's going on and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. And what about outside of the classroom? Come on, you've been in Grenada, yeah? So
Yeah.
What's life like in Grenada? You know, I can only see the pictures and only imagine. What other things have you been doing? Because as a medical student, you can't just study all the time. The brain needs to relax. It needs to grow. Come on, what other things can the students do who are listening today or perhaps watching the recording? Grenada,
like just like everybody else, Friday night is a good time to go out with your classmate. We have a drink. We can go to options, that's some bars and stuff. And a weekend, if you have like, you know, very productive during the week, you can go to the beach with your friends or like post after exam. That's what everybody do. You just go to the beach right away. And after exam, relaxing, hang out with your friends and kind of like put medical school on the side. And there are awful lot of tours for like, you know, I would say waterfalls or like, you know, water sport, a lot of things fun things you can do, or you can even rent a boat with a couple of your friends and just go in the sea. That would be makes a lot of fun. I did that, so brilliant. Yeah, that was really interesting.
I'm not sure if the students were there at the time or not, but in the last couple of years we put up Belford Hall. Were you on campus when Belford Hall was there? So we now have our own beach.
Oh wow!
And some barbecue stations, some pool tables, and it's a bit of a. Although it's an academic building, the lower floor is all open, and there's a sort of recreational and relaxation area right on the beach there, which is a fantastic setting. And if you look at some of the promotional videos online, it's probably Belford that you see
Really can't think of many universities which would boast their own beach, in addition to kind of all the amazing facilities that they've got at SGU in the Caribbean. What I have noticed is I've noticed you've got this shuttle bus which takes you around campus, because the campus is pretty vast as well. You know, I think the only time I've ever been on something like that is Disney World or the MTR in Hong Kong, where I can get around that easy. Okay.
You have to take the bus, man. You have to.
Oh, right. Okay. It's quite okay with the heat and things like that, which, to be quite honest, I'd be quite grateful of some warmth now. So I'm quite jealous of everyone who's in Hong Kong, Zimbabwe, or Grenada at the moment. Okay. Right. What I'm just going to say now before we get in, we haven't got too many questions. A few people have had to leave us, but if anyone's got any more questions, either on Facebook, which I'm watching here, or on Zoom directly, please just tap it in. There is one question about scholarships. Well, I will just answer very, very, very easily. Someone said, how can we apply for a scholarship? Can international students apply for scholarships? Do we need some sort of degree to apply? What's the procedure? The procedure is actually fairly simple. Once you've applied, and just to give you an idea, you can apply in the link in the description below this video. And you've had your interview and you've had an offer, you will be then sent a document to complete, which is a confidential document, a financial declaration. And the university offers scholarships from $20,000 up to about $120,000 for the duration of the program. So there are scholarships available, but you would apply after you've received an offer and after you've basically filled that declaration in, and the university will come back with an offer. And basically you don't qualify as such, you simply fill that declaration in after you've received the offer for either the 4, 5, 6 or even 7-year program, and the university will then allocate a scholarship if they feel it's suitable for you as an applicant. There's no doubt more detail on that available, but I think in the context of this call, this webinar, it wouldn't be appropriate to go into all the intricacies of that. That's something which would deal with as an individual basis. Okay. What I'm going to do, really, if there's no other questions at the moment, is if anyone has got anything else to share. I think if Professor Clunes has got something to share about, you know, how the university supports students academically on top of what they've already said, or if any one of the delegates has got anything particular to share, please just let us know. We do have another question, actually, which coming in. How does completing the Northumbria program compare in terms of facilities and learning, etc.? Is it assumed that the learning is standard and of the same level? That's definitely a question for Professor Clunes. Professor Clunes, if we just say that. So the attendee who's anonymous, as basics of maybe not on here on our list, has asked, how about the actual program in Northumbria? So if they're doing the 2 years in Northumbria, how does it compare with doing that same equivalent 2 years in Grenada?
Sure. It's the exact same exams that you'll set. It's the exact same content. And of course, we've been doing this for years now, so we're very used to, it's a single team. We've done virtual meetings for as long as I've been in Grenada, because you work with your faculty colleagues that are in Northumbria University. So, for example, when I was course director for 5 years in physiology, and an integral part of how I functioned on a daily basis was talking to my colleague in Northumbria University, and we would sit together and we would discuss the issues, we would discuss how we put the exam together. It would be a very collaborative process. So the curriculum is identical, and the delivery of the curriculum, of course, is variable in as much as the individual delivering those, like in any other place, the individuals have their own slight, let's call it academic freedom, the kind of emphasis, but it's the same learning objectives, it's the same resources available, it's the same examinations we actually sit them at the same time. That's why we have to do the exams in the morning in Grenada, so that our British colleagues can log in and do the exams at the exact same time. So yeah, just a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication between the faculty at both sites. And we all have access to each other's sites, so it's identical resources.
I suppose the staff from Northumbria would quite like visiting the campus in Grenada if they want a break from Northern English weather, but okay. So yeah, so from that perspective, I hope that's dealt with that. Obviously, you'll be learning in the facilities of Northumbria University, which is a major UK university. So, you know, in terms of facilities, you don't have to be quite concerned. And obviously the investment from the tuition fees goes straight back into the facilities and education that you would have at any of the universities that we would ever talk about. Okay.
And yeah, and we have our own dedicated building there. So at Northumbria University, you do your lectures, you do your small groups, you do all your learning activities in the one sort of area, and the sim lab is not in that building, but we have our own sort of distinct building in Northumbria. So there's very much of a community feel to the Northumbria students. They all know each other very well. It's a very tight bonded group. And even when they come to Grenada in their second year, they often say that they kind of spread out, but they always find themselves coming back as a group together as well.
Maybe growing up together and learning together. That's medicine, though, isn't it? You're part of a bigger, in this case, multidisciplinary team, really. Working towards the same end. Okay, just to kind of, I think, finish it off really, because we've got no more questions at the moment, unless anything comes in while we're just summarising, because it's now 2 o'clock, and I wanted to try and leave this for now. Oh, another question has just come in. Okay, always happens. Okay. Is the group in Northumbria small, or how many students are there in a usual class?
Yeah, I mean, currently we have about 60 to 80 students in our first term, and we've got 2 intakes a year. Generally, the spring intake is slightly smaller, and the August intake is slightly bigger because that's on a more usual academic cycle. But it's typically sort of 50 students maybe in spring, and sort of 60 to 80 students, or maybe a little higher occasionally.
That's a significant number, actually, when you're thinking about this is effectively a branch campus of the university, in the UK, and students sometimes want that multi-country experience. They want 2 years in the UK, 1 year in the Caribbean, perhaps 2 years in the United States. There are very few programs that offer that level of variety, which is a strength. Yeah. Okay. So I want to just say thank you to everyone who's joined us for today, both Ninand, Kenneth, Jessica, Professor Clunes, and obviously everyone who signed up and actually watched. We did have a significant number of people, both on Facebook and on Zoom. It's starting to die off now, as obviously lunch breaks come to an end before 2 p.m. in the UK or around the world, depending on what time it is where you are. So I want to say thank you to everyone. Jessica, best of luck getting that through the PLAB and into the UK. Ninand, another year after this, a year and a half of residency before you then tend to have a break and perhaps go on to do your PhD work or your research, which is quite common in the US to do after residency. And Kenneth, I know you're I think 2 years away from graduation now, and perhaps coming to work in the UK or in the US, and St. George's gives you that opportunity. So listen, best of luck to all you three. Hopefully our paths will cross again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Clunes, for giving your time in the morning in Grenada. And I want to say thanks to everyone who's attended today. As I said, if you want to watch this video again, it's going to be on YouTube this afternoon, where it will be based then forever. So you can watch all of my incorrect pronunciation again. And yeah, please take a look at the video. If you've got any more questions, you can drop us an email. And if we don't know the answer, we'll definitely put you in contact with someone who can give you the correct one. Okay. Thank you, and everyone have a good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You too.